Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Essential NFL Podcast. My name's Stephen Clinton. I'm your host slash resident data scientist slash film junkie here. So, apologies for the absence the last couple weeks, as I mentioned on first podcast. I do have my day job and everything, and as much as I enjoy doing this, hey, time has to permit. So I am optimistic with some changes coming up in life that I'll be able to do the show more consistently moving forward here. So hopefully be back for week 6 as well as week 5. But we're at the quarter pole of the season. Haven't been able to watch all the film this year, which is a disappointment. But I have watched. Let's see. I think I've watched. I've missed 16 games total. I think I've got 5 in week 2 and 11 in week 3. I've watched all of week 1 and week 4. So that put me at 48 games out of the 64. So not doing dreadfully. So we'll continue to backtrack and maybe watch some film this weekend, catch up on those weeks, hopefully, because I don't want to leave those in the rear for too long. But always good to learn from things. But we'll look at what I have seen so far, and look at Minnesota Cleveland, and of course there was the Niners Rams. What a crazy game that was, and look forward to seeing that overtime film. I'll watch that later today, but have not seen that, and I won't talk about the teams on the bye week today just because I have about 45 minutes that I get to talk about this today, and so we'll speed through the teams that are out there. So just going to be rolling through covers.com, and so look at some of the numbers out there, and we'll start with the game over in London with the Minnesota Vikings playing against the Cleveland Browns. So we're going to see the kid from Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, out there for the Browns. Just off the cuff evaluation is he's too small to be an effective player in the NFL, and he's not athletic enough. He's going to have to be a dynamic athlete at his height to really make it work in the NFL. It's not to say he can't be, a good timing and rhythm passer who functions as a backup quarterback, but we just see in this league it's tough if you don't have some requisite arm strength. And I think this is something we've seen recently with Tua Tagovailoa and Bryce Young, is that if everything's on time and they're able to throw in rhythm, then they can attack the deep areas of the field. They can hit intermediate routes, stuff like that. But when you force them off their timing and they get out on the run and everything like that, they're just not able to really reach deep areas of the field, threaten deep areas of the field. It really limits what they can do in second reaction plays in the scramble drill, and I think it's just a tough way to live. Now Cleveland continues to run the ball well. This Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State, really physical runner, has a very good feel for where to run, how to fit his run lanes, everything like that. So even with the injuries that they've had at offensive tackle in Cleveland, and DeJuan Jones once again going down for a season, I think that you're going to continue to see this offense be relatively effective just because of Quinshon Judkins in the run game and sort of the rhythm he should be able to establish as a down-to-down runner. But I don't expect this offense to be a whole heck of a lot better than it was with Joe Flacco. Not to say that Joe Flacco was playing great, but it's not I don't think an upgrade at quarterback that they're getting here. So we'll see. Maybe Jerry Jeudy starts catching the ball. That was a rough one last week for number 3 for Cleveland. But they need something to get going here, and it's just a tough situation, obviously. But got 4 games out of Flacco. I think one thing that's not talked about enough is that month is important for Dylan Gabriel, and I don't know about Shedeur Sanders because just an aside, really questionable maturity, and saying that you're seeing all the quarterbacks in the NFL and how bad the play is, and you're just ready to go. And based on his preseason film, he is not ready to go. And definitely as we're seeing it play out in real time, and the mind thing, kind of get why he went where he went in the draft, I guess. And because he's not that talented physically, just based on his preseason film. He looks like he could be Kenny Pickett in a best case scenario. So there you go. Anyways, we'll see how this plays out. Dylan Gabriel's had a month to prepare. Watching Joe Flacco prepare, get yourself ready. That's a lot of time, if you use that time wisely for a backup quarterback. So hopefully that helps him out, because he's going against a really tough Minnesota defense here. Brian Flores' group is going to continue to do a lot of stuff. I don't know that they've really gotten the juice they want out of the defensive tackle additions in Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. Those guys are just, on the backside of their careers, and their elite days are behind them, I think, which was a concern when you're signing older guys. But you got to sign who's available, right, if you're going to throw the money around in free agency. So, I expect Minnesota, could very well have a pick 6 in this game. Expect them to cause a lot of confusion, take away a lot of the short area passes, and if they can force Gabriel to throw it deep, we'll see. But I don't think that's going to go great. On the other side of the ball, for Minnesota, I think that it's becoming pretty clear, based on what I saw from J.J. McCarthy and what Carson Wentz is doing. I think Carson Wentz should probably start moving forward. And that's not to say I'm out on J.J. McCarthy right now, but one really strong take I have about quarterback development in the NFL, and this is just based on my observations of quarterbacks developing in the NFL, not anything else. The idea that you need to be playing to develop is just ridiculous. It's just not a good statement to be thrown out there. And frankly, if that is your assessment of the situation, I think that's pretty concerning. The example I would point to is Jordan Love with the Packers. He went out in that first game. He had to sub for Rodgers in the COVID year. He was clearly not ready to play quarterback in the NFL, and he didn't know how to operate the huddle. He just looked rattled out there. He just was. It was all happening too fast for him, right? And I think that's a great example of he got to have that experience, and then he got about another year before he went into a game again for Rodgers. And you could tell that even though Jordan Love hadn't played any regular season games since then, he had been working his tail off at all the things that he had struggled with in his first game action for the past year. And he was much better at that point. And then we saw again when he takes over as the starter, there was another big leap, right? And then just continued ascension, right? We can talk about what Sam Darnold did in the background when he was on the bench in Carolina between his first starting opportunity then and how it looked down the stretch. We can talk about what Geno Smith did when he was on the bench for years and years behind multiple guys in multiple organizations and what he was able to do with his opportunity in Seattle, right? I think in these cases, these were not like good quarterbacks who got screwed out of their jobs in their first opportunities. They went out and were playing poorly for one reason or another, just weren't ready. And I think that, J.J. McCarthy needs to continue to prepare as if he's going to get back out there this season, all those things. But, the idea that he's not going to get better in the background, he should be getting better once he's off this ankle injury. He should be able to find ways to get better after having played in a couple NFL games and seeing the speed and everything like that. So I don't really think that's a justifiable concern to bring up. And if he's not going to develop in the background, then it's a moot point anyway. So I think that what you owe your team with the Minnesota Vikings, with this veteran-heavy roster that's ready to win now, I think you owe them having Carson Wentz out there, because for the bad with Carson Wentz, Carson is driving the ball down the field well. He just looks more confident out there, more in command. He's making more big plays. He's taking advantage of his receivers and making big throws. They were close to having a few more big plays last week against the Steelers team that's really coming together and looks like they're going to be just a tough out every week, in my opinion. So, I think that, I'm not thinking Minnesota's, necessarily going anywhere. But, if Carson Wentz builds on what he did last week, and I just would have a really hard time saying that we're going back to JJ based on what he did. And that's not to throw JJ out or anything, but I think that in the NFL you need to start the best player. And if Wentz continues to play well, now if Carson comes out and it goes against this very tough Cleveland Browns defense that has some guy named Myles Garrett who continues to dominate, and just it's just a pretty good defense. They've got their holes and they're dealing. They had some injury concerns at corner, and kind of when the backups get in and it's not just, Newsome and Ward out there dominating, then, things get iffy like they do for any team. But, this is a good Cleveland defense. They're not an easy out. And, if Carson comes out, has a terrible game, this is a totally different discussion, right? But, I didn't think that, Carson Wentz necessarily lost them that game against the Steelers. It wasn't perfect from him by any means, but I thought there was a lot of positive to pull from Carson Wentz's film last week is the way I would put it. So, not expecting perfection, but hey, does this guy look like he could be potentially one of these guys who picks up his career? And you remind yourself that Carson Wentz was in the same draft class as Jared Goff, right? Jared Goff certainly is not the same player he was when he left the Rams. Everybody has a different journey. Nothing's guaranteed here, but I think that Carson's definitely playing better, and you get to see all the good stuff with this Minnesota deal. The offensive line's so banged up in Minnesota, everything to do with this game, I'd say screams under, with the whole situation. But, I don't know. It's not the most attractive thing with the line being what it is. But, I would say the under is kind of the play here. So, moving on, Dallas Cowboys and the New York Jets. I mean, what a crazy game between the Cowboys and the Packers. Speaking of quarterbacks developing, it's become clear that, Jordan Love's game management in the past 2 weeks in those Packers losses has just been atrocious. The whole situation before halftime in this game against the Cowboys that allows the Cowboys, to who had finally gotten a touchdown on the board to get another quick touchdown and end up going into the half with the lead because, Love is getting the ball stripped out of his hand. And then, the week before against the Cleveland Browns, he throws just an inexcusable interception that opens the door for Cleveland to come back. And, he needs to clean this up. It's pretty simple. I think. But yeah, flipping over to Dallas, though, they took advantage of the situation and they went to work. And George Pickens is obviously fitting in well. Last time on this show, I guess it would have been after week 1. So, was still trying to figure out, he hooked the guy around the neck. But hey, it's been pretty dang good ever since. And, I think that Pickens was especially impressive with CeeDee Lamb out of the lineup. I mean, he just stepped up and he looked like the absolute best version of himself, making contested catches, also showing off the burners when he, catches that stop route and turns and gets north. And remember that, George Pickens, once he gets moving, he can do some damage after the catch as well. So, George Pickens looks like he's going to be making himself a lot of money here. I would assume that there's a very good chance that, the Cowboys are going to try to keep him in-house with the way that he's playing. But he is, setting himself up for a massive, massive free agent deal or extension with the Cowboys, given the way he's playing and the way the market is going. So, that's looking good. This run game continues to be really solid. And, I would say the biggest thing with Dallas, though, is Dak Prescott is just playing phenomenal football right now. And he's, making really strong decisions and, just really, really pinpoint with his ball placement. And then you throw in what Javonte Williams is bringing in the run game. I think this is a really fun Dallas offense to watch and, expect them to keep rolling. The defense, not so much fun to watch if you're cheering for the Cowboys, right? I mean, watching that Packers game back, Green Bay made their mistakes, but like the opportunities, they should have scored more points than they did. There's just not a whole lot of resistance to the run game a lot of the time. Green Bay had guys running open all over the place. Kaiir Elam is just getting beat. The one real positive I would say about Dallas's defense coming out of that game is I thought that Trayvon Diggs looked really good. Didn't get challenged a whole lot in coverage. He had kind of the near interception along the sideline. It was hard to tell if they had a no play on a penalty. Reading the box score, they don't have everything going on, and I don't have time to look everything up, but Diggs nearly intercepted that one, and then he was just really active coming up on screens and stuff like that. So I thought that he was moving around really well, and I thought Trayvon Diggs looked really good in this game. So I think that's a positive for Dallas. That said, I think that they're an over team this whole season with the way the offense is playing and just the talent deficiencies on the defense. And they got, as I say, some positives, but it's more a work in progress right now. Speaking of works in progress, the Jets, I think that when Justin Fields has been out there for a full game, they've been better than the 0-4 record suggests. I felt like watching that Miami game that if they'd played 6 quarters, then the Jets wind up winning the game. I thought that they made a bunch of mistakes early. They fumble going into the end zone on their first drive after driving it down inside the 1. And it's just a comedy of errors with the Jets, right? And, at some point that has to stop because you're not going to win football games in the NFL doing that. But if we're just looking at it on a down-to-down basis, I think that things are in a better state than certainly than the record suggests, because the record suggests that this is a full-blown disaster, right? And to some degree, there's some kernel of truth to that, right? Like, this is not a good football team. But at the same time, as I say, I thought that they were pretty close to beating Miami. I also thought that, and I don't often say this, especially in a game that I didn't bet on, had no rooting interest. I thought that the Jets got jobbed from an officiating standpoint in that game. I thought that there were 2 clear unnecessary roughnesses on Justin Fields, and I'm not a big one to call that out, but he got tackled when he was clearly out of bounds at one point, and then on another play, well after the play, he gets shoved, completely on his back, and neither of those were called. And then on a late Miami drive when they needed it, I thought there was an egregious hold by Aaron Brewer where the right guard's coming off of a combo block and Brewer's arms are out and just on this guy's jersey, and it's not called at the point of attack. And so I thought it was one-sided in that sense. So all that's to say is I don't think the Jets are just a full-blown dumpster fire here. And they obviously are going to need to get a win here sooner than later, or it's just going to be a really uncomfortable building to be in. But, all things considered, when Justin Fields is healthy and able to run this offense, I mean, Breece Hall looks really, really good. He's doing really well. Fashanu continues to look good at left tackle, and then Membu at right tackle continues to look good as well. It's been a bummer that AVT's out, but I think that Joe Tippmann's done fine kicking over to guard. So I think they've got a good run game. they should be a difficult team to play against in some sense. But yeah, they need to clean all this stuff up. So I would take Dallas. I like the over to some degree, but also wouldn't be afraid to play the Jets up in a teaser if you're into those teasers across the 3 and the 7 for a 6-pointer. Depends on the book you're at and all. But yeah, be an interesting game there. Denver, Philadelphia. I mean, this is going to be a great matchup, right? The Eagles, speaking of 4-0 teams, just seem to be in like such a weird state, and I don't think they're doing a great job calling the offense this year. They need to, figure some things out. They're not playing as well in certain respects, but again, some of it just feels like them not getting into gear, and they are finding ways to win football games. That's for sure. Getting off to a fast start, and having some turnovers, some good special teams opportunities, and who knows, but we all remember the Philadelphia Eagles team of 2 years ago where they were winning all those games, and then the bottom just fell out down the stretch. And it's great that they're 4-0, but I think it's hard to say that there's not cracks showing here. There's still Keely Ringo ended up playing a good chunk. As the extra corner, the third corner. In what I saw now, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean continue to be absolutely dominant. So those two spots are in good shape. And, maybe if this doesn't work out with Ringo and his audition over the next couple weeks, that the Eagles are in the market for a new cornerback. Although, man, that market is getting thin with, so many guys have been injured and who's out there, right? And, but, I do think that Andrew, I'm going to mess up the name here, but Mukaba, the safety from Texas, I like him. I think he's got good instincts. He might be thin, but I don't think he has a problem with physicality, so enjoying him. The Eagles' defense is just overall just looking really, really good. I mean, Jalen Carter, Zach Bond continue to do their thing. So, they're going to be tough to play against, but this offense is just not figuring things out. They don't have much rhythm, as I say, and it's just frustrating to watch this again. They just don't seem to be pushing the right buttons right now. So we'll see if they can get it back on track. But Denver is, a 4-point underdog here. And I understand why to some degree because the Eagles are so talented. But this definitely feels like a spot where Denver's, lost 2 games on last second field goals. And that's the difference between them being 4-0. And then the Eagles have kind of had the maybe a little bit more fortunate bounces. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver win this game outright at all. Just the NFL being the NFL. They need Bo Nix to, it's tough though, right? Because they need Bo Nix to be making plays for the offense to really function. But he throws a ridiculous interception down at the goal line in this game against Cincinnati, and it doesn't matter because they killed Cincinnati. But at the same time, it was a bad interception at the end of a long drive that a ball just should not have been thrown. And there have been too many moments like that from him. I think that some of the missed throws get overstated because I think that every quarterback misses deep throws in this league, and he hits his share of them too. But yeah, it's just some of the mistakes he's making are just tough because I think he's got a really, really good cast around him. The Broncos' offensive line looks great, playing at a really high level. I think R.J. Harvey keeps coming along. J.K. Dobbins is playing great for them. He looks as healthy as he's looked in several years. I think he looks a lot sprier, a lot more explosive. And quicker than he did with the Chargers even last year. And then, Cortland Sutton continues to be a really good player. I think that Troy Franklin's coming along really nicely for them. He had a couple of deep opportunities that he wasn't able to reel in, but, definitely got a chance to make some plays. And, we'll see how it goes. But, this is a really good Denver team and, a lot of good players on the defense. So it would not surprise me in the slightest to see them come in and get the upset against Philadelphia here. As I say, do understand why the line is what it is. But, these are two very good teams. And, I don't think Philadelphia is going undefeated this season. So moving on to the Houston-Baltimore game, which is, the last time these teams played. It's easy to forget that Houston almost went into the end zone to score and make this a very close game. Instead they, got completely blown out and ended up scoring. I think it ended up being 31-2 with their only points coming on a safety against Baltimore in that game late last season. That was just kind of disaster for Houston. Absolutely a disaster for Houston. But, again, watching that one live and, having money on Baltimore, I remember thinking that, it was pretty fortunate the way that sequence played out because it was very close to swinging the score and making the outcome look a lot different. And that's not to say Houston was playing well in that game or anything like that overall, but just to say that the score probably overstated what was happening there. Now, Houston is now going to wind up playing a Baltimore team that is just not the same unit that started the season. Lamar Jackson's not playing, so that's the obvious big one. But defensively, they're now down Justin Madubuike or Nnamdi Madubuike at defensive tackle. They're down Kyle Van Noy on the edge. I think Roquan Smith is out. Chidobe Awuzie and Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins all got hurt last week. Jair Alexander was already hurt at corner, so I don't know who's going to be playing corner. The good thing is they're going against a Houston offense that is going to have a tough time playing against anybody because the offensive line is just so bad. And, CJ Stroud is, playing up and down. He's got his moments, but it's not consistent football from CJ Stroud. He's got weapons for sure, with Nico still playing well and everything like that. Woody Marks looking like he's emerging. And I honestly think Nick Chubb is looking fairly good coming off the knee injury he came off. I'm not saying he's like peak Nick Chubb or anything, but I think that he's moving around and looking pretty spry out there, having some good gains. So, I think they've got some good players around it on offense, but like this offensive line is just so bad, and they don't do anything to, help them out or protect them. I feel with the scheme or the setup of the offense, it's not, I don't necessarily feel like it's a well-designed offense by any means in Houston. So, throw in the fact that Houston's defense is still looking awesome. Kamari Lassiter, just really, really strong performance last week where, he wasn't seeing, Stingley wasn't seeing much work at all, and Lassiter just had a lot of ball production across from him working on, whether it was Alec Iomanar or some of the other tight ends guys. And, I think that, Lassiter's presence as that second corner and his ability to make plays on the ball there is, such a key part of this defense. But, so I expect Houston to shut down this Baltimore offense because I don't know how talented the Baltimore offense is with Lamar not out there and Cooper Rush replacing him, and that just changes all the dynamics of everything. And this Houston defense is extremely talented. So you couple that with how bad the Texans line is. I think that this game probably plays to an under. It's kind of a slow-paced game, all that sort of stuff. And you sure think that Houston, or you sure hope that Houston can take advantage of this opportunity, get a win and kind of right the ship after the starting, 0-3. But we will see how that goes. Moving along to a matchup with a couple of young quarterbacks. So we got Jackson Dart in his second start playing against the New Orleans Saints and Spencer Rattler. Off the bat, I would say that, if you don't know exactly how that Chargers-Giants game went, it's important to note that there were two almost pick sixes by the Giants defense. One, Dexter Lawrence snags an interception right at the line off Herbert, and then the second one, Drew Phillips doesn't fall down, Ladd McConkey does, and Drew Phillips winds up returning the ball into the red zone. So that it had a lot to do with the final score, right? Of course, two pick sixes in a game would be, monumental. This was not quite that, but it was close. Jackson Dart definitely can run one, right? Had a 50-yarder come off the board, actually. And, he can definitely move around, definitely has, some explosive ability to him. It's going to be interesting to see what he develops into in the league. I didn't think he, was sitting in the pocket and playing quarterback with a lot of, timing or rhythm or timing or rhythm, I guess I would say. But that's all going to come, right? Like that was his first start. Not a big deal. They won the football game, which is the most important thing. And I'm excited to watch Jackson Dart continue to play. I obviously wish Malik Neighbors was still going to be out there. That's a pretty easy thing to say. But yeah, we'll see here. And the defense is definitely looking really strong. I mean, I've loved Abdul Carter from the get-go. Obviously, I think that people are, making a little bit much of what happened against the Chargers last week. Storm Norton was in the game at tackle for a lot of that, and Abdul Carter was destroying Storm Norton, who's been a good, backup, third, fourth offensive tackle in the league for some years, Toledo guy, so I'm, big fan of Storm Norton the person, and hey, Storm Norton the football player has done pretty damn well for himself in this world, but he is, not like a starting offensive tackle who's expected to be able to match up with an Abdul Carter. So, same time, I've loved Abdul Carter since the moment I saw him start moving. I just was a little bit, just looking at it a little bit cockeyed, I guess, when, he's destroying Storm Norton. What is it that you're learning about this player right now? Because he looked like he was ultra talented. I would have assumed before the game that if he goes against Storm, Abdul is going to have a huge advantage. So it played out that way. And if that's what it takes to get him some more edge rushing reps, I guess that's what it is. But, Thibodeau's playing well. Burns is playing well. It's one of those things that, I talked about back in the offseason that, Giants getting out over their skis and, trading for Burns rather than using that pick on, there were a bunch of lineman right there with the pick they traded for Burns, and it would have been an interior lineman, and they wouldn't be having these problems with deployment now. But that's water under the bridge, and just a lesson to be learned that it's hard to say what pieces you need as an NFL team, and don't push your chips in unless you are darn well sure that you are on your way. Flipping it over to the Saints, I think Spencer Rattler continues to play just fine. I think he's establishing himself. It's a long-term backup in this league who's going to get paid for a long time. There's really good structure around him, I would say. I think that New Orleans, I wouldn't say that Kelvin Banks has been perfect by any means, but he looks like he's going to start at left tackle in the league if the season keeps going this way, and be interested to see what he builds into over the offseason. But I think that overall he's been just fine to get started. Fuaga's been good in his move to right tackle. I think that Kendre Miller's is looking really, really good. He looks like a player for sure. Really strong game this past week, and then they got the receivers on the outside. So I think that Rattler's not doing anything magical, but it's a tough Saints team to play against. The defense is fine. I don't think that they're overwhelming by any means, but they're also have good players all over the field and not much in the way of holes. I'm trying to think what number 33, the free safety, and I'll look this up, but he really stuck out to me in this last game. It's one of those things where they signed so many veterans. So Jonas Sanker, the rookie safety from Virginia, who they play him back as the free safety quite a bit down in New Orleans, and I think he's a player. And so that's where they signed so many veterans here, and they cut off their paths to finding these guys. And fortunately in Sanker's case, he is getting his opportunity to get out there. Sorry, I was trying to look up when he was drafted here. He's their third round pick, and this is exactly what you want if you're the New Orleans Saints at this stage in your build. Like finding a starting free safety potentially with the 93rd overall pick. I mean, Jonas Sanker, if he ends up having a similar career to what say Marcus Williams had for the Saints, I think he was a second round pick, but whatever. That's a big positive for this team as they go into next year and try to figure out the quarterback thing and really scale this thing up. So probably won't be much of a game. Depending if you can find the favorite either side, I would tease this game up. Across the line in the 7. Otherwise, I wouldn't play it because I could see it getting across the line. Raiders and Colts, and I'm going to really speed this up because I'm going to, just have to touch on teams briefly. So, Raiders, awesome to see Ashton Jeanty in that stance. He looks more comfortable. He's very explosive in that stance. He can really run, man. Geno Smith needs to make better decisions. The first interception last week, definitely not the best route into that coverage. They got kind of trapped there, but then he throws another interception on a dagger into, just a cover 2 side, and it's just hard to say what he's seeing. It's Raiders line is not very good. It's just kind of a disappointing group. And then the defense, Mad Max Crosby had a game last week, man. He almost had 2 interceptions at the line. He did intercept one of them. One was swatted. Forced fumble had him 4. He was just all over the place. That'll be, on his, if he, whatever accolades he's up for, that game will be on the reel. But the rest of the defense around him is just not good. 36 Kyu Blu Kelly is just a mark on the outside, and he's causing them all sorts of problems. So I think that the Raiders might be able to keep up with the scoring in this game. The Colts won't have Xavier Howard out there anymore, which I assume the family reasons he's retiring is the family is tired of watching him get his ass kicked out there because he just can't move anymore, and he just shouldn't have been starting in the NFL. So we'll see who the Colts roll out there instead of Xavier Howard. It's a little bit concerning that they had him out there at all because he clearly couldn't play anymore. But on offense, the Colts keep rolling along, man, and this group looks really good. They'd have even more points on the board if Adonai Mitchell would, just play football like a normal person, I guess. But, there's reasons he wasn't drafted higher, right? And, explosive player. Hopefully he cleans that up and carries the ball across the goal line next time and stops holding people. But, we'll see. Daniel Jones, I think, just keeps humming along. I thought he had... he still has his moments where he's going to make some mistakes. I thought there was a seam route that Pickett's dropped by the safety, but it was just kind of tough to see what you're doing there. And but he's got less of those moments, and he's playing really positive football overall. So I think that Daniel Jones is clearly an above average quarterback in the NFL at this point, and the Colts could take that and run away with the AFC South, I think, this year, although Jacksonville might have something to say about that. So kind of like the over in that one, we'll see. Miami, Carolina, I'm going to say very little on this because this is a terrible matchup. Miami got the win last week. I mentioned them in the Jets stuff. I didn't think it was too impressive. The line's doing fine. I think that it's better than it could have been based on the first week, but this is not like, doesn't seem like this is running so smooth. I think the offensive line is still really, really struggling just across the board. It's hard to say what player I would be most concerned about, but not a good group. I think that Derek Brown is going to have a field day. He looks really good for Carolina, clearly back from that ACL. He destroyed Chris Lindstrom in the Falcons, or the Panthers' upset win over the Falcons. He just, several times Chris Lindstrom's a very good player, especially, when he's in space. He does get overwhelmed physically sometimes, but Derek Brown overwhelmed him physically at a level that you just don't see very often. I mean, he was just tossing him around and ragdolling him. So Brown looks awesome. I think that, you got a couple of players in, Nick Scordon keeps popping off the film for me with Carolina. And then is it Princely? Sorry, I'm looking it up right here. But 7 and 11. Nick Scordon being 11. And then, well, of course, Trayvon Mooring being number 7. I don't know why. 7 is Oladepe on the Titans, who I like as well. He's a big, imposing dude on the edge for them. But I'm trying to think who the second guy for Panthers is. But in any case, both of their young guys have flashed a little bit. Nick Scordon especially, and it's number 3, Princely. I'm not even gonna try. That was bad. But Umana Melon. Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. But yeah, Princely, he's flashed as well. But honestly, Nick Scordon has stood out to me more. He's the rookie from Texas A&M, who I guess he put on like a bunch of weight at Texas A&M, and he'd been better at Purdue the year before. But yeah, he definitely sticks out to me as a really strong presence on the edge, who is a good player for this Carolina Panthers team. Now, the offense, it just is what it is at this point. Bryce Young is a borderline starter in the NFL, and he's so small, there's just not that much you can do with him. And, Tet McMillan is a really, really good player for him on the outside, but Bryce is just not able to take full advantage of that. And, with the injuries they've had on the offensive line, I just don't think they can run the ball well enough. And, I think that this offseason it's time to end the Bryce Young experiment. I would trade him and just let him go. Take his journey. I think he's going to be in the league a long time as a backup because he can definitely play with timing and rhythm and accuracy and all these things. But, I think that it's good. I don't think he's just going to get another opportunity based on the way he's playing right now. So I'd just stay away from. Well, I guess you could use either side of this game and tease it from the 1.5 to 7.5 if you're doing those teasers. But besides that, no interest. Okay, Tampa Bay, Seattle. This is a tough game just because Tampa Bay is so banged up, right? Bucky Irving won't be there. Mike Evans already out. They've lost Cody Mauch and Luke Gadecki for the season. That said, Baker Mayfield just keeps making plays, keeps battling. Emeka Egbuka looks freaking awesome. And, Rashad White will step into the lineup and play. They're doing okay on the offensive line despite the injuries they've had. So, it's one of those things where, man, Baker Mayfield is a really good quarterback right now, and I would not just discount this because he's got all these injuries. Now, at the same time, this is a tough ask for him. Seattle's defense is playing fantastic. They've got an extra few days of rest coming off of Thursday Night Football last week. Tampa Bay has to fly up to the Pacific Northwest. And, Seattle is just, really good team. Leonard Williams has a strong case as Defensive Player of the Year. In my opinion, there's other candidates on this defense, but he's the guy that sticks out to me. I think Josh Jobe continues to play just outstanding football, using his size really well to relate to receivers and take away throwing windows. So I think it's going to be a tough go. And, flip side of that, Sam Darnold looks really, really sharp. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba he's dominated, man. He's going out on the outside, going to work. I thought Max Melton played 3 really good quarters for the Cardinals in that Thursday night game. And Max Melton had been playing well this year. And then JSN just started going to work on Melton in the fourth quarter, and he dominated him. And Darnold's, making it work, and he's taken full advantage of those opportunities, throwing the ball really, really well, in my opinion, attacking downfield on a regular basis. It's, I think, a well-balanced attack in Seattle. They've stopped throwing Jalen Milroe out there. I think they figured out what they want to be doing. Torrey Horton almost had another deep ball reeled in. I think that they're using Cooper Kupp in a nice way where he's not the focal point. They're not overfeeding him, but he is making some plays. With this run game, with the way Gray Zabel is playing at left guard, he's been terrific. Charles Cross has really come along. I think that Jalen Sundell, the center, has been a really, really nice find for them in the middle. Still feel like the right guard spot with Bradford is a problem at times, but Abe Lucas is playing fine. And I think the Seattle organization, team, everything, it's just it's all going in the right direction for them now, and the NFC West is going to be a competitive division. But man, I think Seattle has pushed all the right buttons, and yeah, I don't know how you can't be happy with the results of this offseason reset and where it's going. So I would lean to the Seattle side honestly with everything Tampa Bay has going against them with the travel, everything like that. Same time, I'm not trying to bet against Baker Mayfield right now because he's just playing so dang good. All right, got 4 more games in like 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna see how quick I can go. Tennessee, Arizona. There's not a lot to say here. No, I will say though, I think that Tennessee to suggest they're not doing anything on offense is not fair. I think that Iomanor had some nice plays in this game. I think Cam Ward continues to throw the ball really well in moments. It's just you have to be watching it down to down because the overall results are terrible. The offensive line is not good. They have to get J.C. Latham back at right tackle. He's their best offensive player right now. He's their best weapon. And with Zeitler being older and Dan Moore and Peter Skoronski just being okay on the other side, and Cushenberry's still working back from this knee. So there's just not enough. There's not enough juice on the outside. There's a lot of problems here. Obviously, it seems like Brian Callahan's kind of breaking down. So, there's nothing good about the situation for Tennessee. But on the defensive side, Simmons is playing great. I thought the defense played pretty darn well against Houston, and then it kind of crumbled down the stretch with some turnovers. But if you're a Titans fan, I think that they might need to reset from the top down. But I do think that Cam Ward looks like he's an NFL quarterback. So we'll see how it all plays out in the years to come. But it's going to be a tough 13 weeks to come. But, I do still like what I'm seeing from Cam Ward. I think he's a guy. So, Arizona side of the ball, coming off a very disappointing failed comeback against Seattle, got it tied up, couldn't pull it out. I really still like what Arizona's defense is doing. Mentioned Max Melton. I think Josh Sweat continues to play well, but this offense, they're just so disjointed. They just can't get it together, and I don't think their run game's very good at all. I think that I like their center, Hate Fortsalt, but Isaiah Adams has been probably a little bit below average this year, and I don't think Paris Johnson's a guy at all. I think he's just average on the left side, and then certainly, right side Jonah Williams is just okay. So it's just not a very good group. They've lost 2 backs now, and Kyler's just got his limitations. So we'll see what happens. I'd tease Arizona down to -1.5. I wouldn't really want to play them at 7, and might even stay away from the teaser because this strikes me as a lurking one where, Tennessee probably finds a way to win a game this year, in Arizona, like with Kyler and everything, like I could see this, going sideways. Maybe not though. All right, much more exciting game to talk about. Washington going to visit the Chargers. Chargers, this is a mess with the O-line and Joe Alt out now, but Herbert continues to play really well overall. He had a bunch of really good throws in that game. Quentin Johnson continues to play very well. I think they've got the weapons to make this work, and Omarion Hampton looks awesome, and he's really breaking in his own. And the other side is Washington's defense is just terrible. And, watching them last week, it was just, very, very disappointing game once again against Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta was just, they made some mistakes in that game too, and they still, just had a lot of success moving the ball. So, Jaden Daniels will be back in this game, but he's going to have a tough ask against this Chargers defense. That is a very stingy unit. The Giants' points notwithstanding, they didn't necessarily give up those drives. So we'll see how that all goes, but. I think that the Chargers have such an advantage on defense here that I would lean their way. But we'll see, Jaden Daniels versus Justin Herbert. But hopefully it's just a spectacular game. So I wouldn't, don't have too strong a take on any of that stuff there. So, but the Chargers, they got to get Joe Alt back because, he's playing phenomenal. And with the injuries they've already had, they really need him. Detroit, Cincinnati. We'll keep this one extremely quick. Really like what the Lions continue to do. I think they're going to light up the Bengals this week because the Bengals, I don't think that any of the Bengals starters in the secondary should really be starting. Maybe that's not so true of Geno Stone because he can fit into the right infrastructure, but in this infrastructure, it ain't working. They played, I don't know how many corners against the Broncos. All of them played poorly, and, it's just not good. They're not getting enough pass rush. Trey Hendrickson can't do it all himself, and I like Tyrese Knight fine. I think he moves around out there, but this organization is in a really bad spot right now, and they seem to quit the game last week, and now they're going to play a Lions team that is, establishing this offense and trying to, show that they're something different without Ben Johnson, and establish this passing game down the field has been a big emphasis. So I could see them trying to get Goff to throw for 400 yards in this game. So we'll see. I think it's a blowout game. I'm not usually big on, big spreads, but man, I just can't see the Bengals doing anything right now. All right, wrapping up the week here, are getting close. New England, Buffalo. I think that New England to cover as an 8 or an 8.5 point underdog is a really strong bet. New England, if they didn't play the Raiders in the rain, and they don't have the turnover game against the Steelers, there's a good chance this team's 4-0. And the flip side of that is that their wins are against the Dolphins and the Panthers. But at the same time, I see a lot of positive things to say about New England. I would start with Will Campbell, who, if you listened to the first show, I was, just seeing him the first time. The frame is just, it stuck out a little bit. But, man, his feet are great. He's been really good these past few weeks. He's really good. He's good in the run game. He's good in the pass game. The New England line has just been, they've been good. It's not dominant, I wouldn't say, but, they've been really solid. And, whether that's been with Gerard Wilson at left guard or with Ben Brown playing there. I think that Onwenu still brings a big physical presence. Obviously, Morgan Moses is a big guy on the right side, so I think that group's doing well. What I really like seeing from the Patriots this past week is what Josh McDaniels was doing with the jet sweeps and bringing either Travion Henderson or Antonio Gibson across. They did that twice with just the old school Wisconsin 2011 when they started doing this a ton with a running back like James White or Melvin Gordon, somebody like that, with their other back coming downhill. They gave one jet sweep and then they run the action again, and it's a downhill run to Stevenson, and that was Stevenson's long run to get near the goal line. And then they had another play later in the game where Travion Henderson lines up in that spot in this two-back set where you've got one back displaced as a slot receiver. He runs a reverse, gets a play. Travion Henderson and Antonio Gibson can both run routes out of the slot. So it's not like this is some pigeonholed little formation that it's like, oh, well, they're in this formation, they're going to run this play. So no, Josh McDaniels is clearly building out a big package out of this to take advantage of getting his explosive running backs out there at receiver to add more oomph to this offense. They clearly had a better plan for getting Stephon Diggs involved last week, and Drake May looks phenomenal. I mean, he's moving around great. He's throwing the ball great. The arm strength, the tools are all there. He's making good decisions. Obviously there have been turnovers. There have been things that he needs to get better at. But I feel like the sprays have been reduced. I thought that he threw the ball real clean against Carolina. Maybe it's not 100%, but this guy is on his way to being an elite quarterback in this league. Of course, on the other side, Buffalo does have an elite quarterback, and Josh Allen and company are playing great. Offensive line continues to look really good. Ryan Vandermark filling in at right tackle for Spencer Brown last week. Not perfect, but I thought he was pretty darn good. Getting Jackson Hawes at tight end has just made the run game even better. I'm not worried about the Buffalo offense. The flip side is, the Buffalo defense, I still think they've got some holes in it. Shaq Thompson was in the game for Matt Milano at linebacker last week. They can make plays, but, there was another touchdown run last week against the Saints where, you see Taylor Rapp and it was Teron Johnson and then Taylor Rapp both missing tackles. And, I don't know how well this group tackles. The Saints, if they hadn't tried to run that Philly special that gets picked on the goal line, they dang near had the lead against Buffalo going into the half, and they were moving the ball pretty consistently behind that O-line. So, I think New England's going to be able to move the ball in this one. I think that it could go over very well, and I think that taking the New England and the points are both appealing things, even though I think Buffalo is a great team. And if you've listened to me at all, I think they're a contender for the title and everything, but I think New England is very clearly right now, especially with Baltimore and Cincinnati certainly getting knocked out of the race with Burrow going down, and Baltimore potentially getting knocked out of the race. And I think that New England looks to me like they're a contender and are going to be in the playoffs, one of the top 7 teams. And they had their struggles on defense early, but Christian Gonzalez was back last week, and that fixed that hole. Now Carlton Davis is the 2. Milton Williams is playing great up front. Barmore's coming along. Harold Landry, I think, is having his best season in years. I think that the safety duo with Craig Woodson and Jalen Hawkins, if I'm got that correct, I think they've been fine. Good to good. And yeah, I think this Patriots team is a really solid team on both sides of the ball. They dominated in both the punt return and the punt game against a Panthers team that really struggled in both of those areas last week. But I think Mike Vrabel's got a really complete team here, and I don't think the Patriots are a joke anymore. I think they're going to be competitive, and the loss to the Steelers, the loss to the Raiders, notwithstanding, I think that they're going to get by those early season hiccups, and they're going to emerge as being a better team than both of those groups. Wrapping this up, talk about a contender that's back and also a rising team. Kansas City Chiefs, man, look phenomenal. Obviously, Ravens had the aforementioned injuries I brought up, but it was crazy how Ravens start that game, go right down the field and score, and then it just felt like it flipped. And Mahomes played phenomenal. Reminded everybody who he is and how fantastic he is. I think that the O-line for the Chiefs is really gelling. I think that Josh Simmons is just coming along. He looks like he's going to be a really good left tackle in this league for a long time. It's allowed Kingsley Suamataia to settle in at left guard, which recoups that second-round pick from last year. Now that's not a missed pick. That's a starting guard who looks like he could develop into a really solid to above-average player. He's got great size for the position. That's just one more good draft pick in these last picks, and that's how this team has to be built with Mahomes' contract, right? And some of the guys they're paying on the defense. So Xavier Worthy's back in the lineup. Last year's first-round pick. He totally changes the dynamic of the offense, and they're a much faster team these days, and they're coming along. They're going to get Sky Moore back, so I think the offense is really humming. And I thought the defense played a really good game in this past one, and a little bit above my expectations. And I think that Noel Williams, the rookie out of Cal, another one of these Cal defensive backfield rookies that seem to be all over the league. I think Noel Williams is playing well on the outside for them and competing, and that allows them to line Jalen Watson and Noel Williams up when they want to move Trent McDuffie into the slot, and then they can weaponize McDuffie again. And McDuffie can cover from anywhere and do all the things he does, but I think that they're getting back to having a lot more in their bag. Chris Jones, who I mentioned maybe being a top 10 to 15 instead of top 2 to 3 defensive tackle in the league after week one. I'd revise that. I'd say that he's playing unbelievably well again. I'd say that he's probably up in there's a bunch of guys right now. Obviously, Jeffrey Simmons, I talked about, some really, really, Leonard Williams, really, really good candidates, but Chris Jones, yeah, he should be right back up in there. So I think that the Chiefs look really, really good. Reason that they're favored by 3.5 going into Jacksonville. Now, Jacksonville, flip side of this, steadily improving. I think they're kind of getting out of these with some surprising wins, or by the skin of their teeth, as we say. But I think that Liam Cohen's doing a really good job working with the talent he has available to him. I think Trevor Lawrence is showing that he's fitting into this offense. He's again, he's got his moments and some drop picks and stuff like that, but he's also got plenty of good moments. And I think this offensive line talent is not great, but they did a really good job, especially against San Francisco, of just protecting them. Run the ball a lot. Just don't ask Walker Little to be dropping back and pure drop back pass protection over and over again against if it's Mikael Williams for the Niners. They just kind of stayed away from that. It seems like Brian Thomas is settling back into his game. He hasn't had a breakout, but he did have the explosive gain to put them in position to win the game against Houston. And then last week he was more consistent and more consistently involved in the offense. So I think it's going in the right direction in Jacksonville. The defensive line looks really good. Defense in general looks really good. I think Devon Hamilton having a big impact. It's always fun when big number 52 in the middle has a big game for them. Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon. A lot of positives here. So I think Jacksonville's trending in the right direction. It looks like they might have the right people in place this time around. And it's great to see Travis Etienne. That is killing me these days. Trevor and Travis. But Travis Etienne just continuing to just ball out. He's always been a talented player, and nice to see him just getting his run, staying healthy. Hopefully that continues for him. And fun Jacksonville team to watch. So I think this is going to be a really good Monday Night Football game. Again, I understand why KC's lined the way they are. I'm not trying to bet on this one. Trip down to Jacksonville, and it could be a surprise, but I think the Chiefs are also rolling right now, and it's going to be pretty tough to slow them down. So. All right. Well, that's it for week 5. Thanks for listening to the Essential NFL podcast. And as I say, hopefully have a show up next week as well. So if in the meantime, hope that you've enjoyed this one. And if you're interested in any of the work, obviously, it's the Essential NFL Substack, which you might be listening through that provider. And want to check out the rest of the things I work on, check out onemanexperiment.com. Till next time, everyone, have a good one.